Guilt and desperation, two dark motivators that frequently drive people out of their comfort zones to confront some antagonism or conflict. This is the running theme in a collection of short stories titled Signed Confessions. Many of the stories take place here in Texas, and they were written by San Antonio native Tom Walker.
In each one of the stories, the male protagonist has something in his past that he's hung up on. He wants to talk about it. He wants to confess. And he tells us about it, but he doesn't get the forgiveness or the pardon that he's looking for in the process, because really the only person who can forgive him is himself, and so the pardon eludes him.
So we're talking about some stories that have some darkness.
I would say a great deal of darkness. There are 7 stories, and they're very long short stories. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but they are not novellas, but they're long short stories. One thing I don't like about short stories is that usually about the time that I'm starting to really get into the characters and like them and understand them, the story is over with. So these are long short stories about men seeking forgiveness, redemption, what have you.
So why did you go in that direction? Why is this a male-dominated collection of short stories?
Well, I gave a reading in Austin at a bookstore called Book People, and the story came up, why don't you have any female protagonists? And I told them I would gladly have written about women if I thought I knew anything about women. That didn't go over very well, but at least I was being frank. So
how much of that is autobiographical, Tom?
Well, I think all of your work is autobiographical in a sense because it comes from a wellspring of personal unconscious. One of the stories, Ode to Billy Jeff, was inspired by the late Billy Lee Bramer, a novelist who wrote probably the best book ever written about Lyndon Johnson. It was called The Gay Place. And I was a friend of Billy's, and I worked with him, so you might say that was autobiographical. The first story, called Blessed Are They That Mourn, actually was inspired by a case of multiple murder and suicide that occurred in San Antonio in 1953. A schoolmate of mine was involved, and I was not directly involved in the case, but I did keep a scrapbook of it, and that was autobiographical. A fourth story, that the last story in the book, which is called Going Down with the Ship, was inspired by an autobiography I wrote for a very prominent military personage here in San Antonio who's dead now. I don't want to mention his name. I don't want to embarrass his family. But there were a lot of revelations that came out as I was writing the book for him, and I used them in the story, which is called Going Down with the Ship.
Tom Walker is a writer who lives in San Antonio. He's written the book of short stories, Signed Confessions. It's published by Prentice Hall. That's it for this edition of Texas Matters. Thanks for listening. I'm Yvette Benavides. You can write to us with an email to texasmatters@tpr.org. And you can comment on our website, tpr.org. Texas Matters is also available free on iTunes. And tune in again next week for another edition of Texas Matters from Texas Public Radio.